It's alive! Alive! And up on to offer today is a Minisforum Atomman? Wait, Atomman? Atomman as Atomman can. No one atoms like the Atomman can? It's Minisforum, but it's under a new name. This is the Core i9 Ultra 185H, so it's the new branding. It's the new notebook CPU, but now in a desktop form factor, but this is no mini like you've ever seen. It's got a built-in screen. It's a touch screen, Windows Hello, and some other stuff. There's a lot to unpack. Let's take a look. So Minisforum has noticed that they're selling a lot of these machines to commercial buyers, not just home buyers. And it's going to be a couple of more tries, I think, before Minisforum is able to compete with Lenovo, Dell, and HP for hospitality machines, the machines that appear behind kiosks, the machines that appear, at cash registers and all the places like that. But this is a great step in the right direction toward that sort of a hospitality machine. It's a little bigger than some of the Minisforum machines that we've taken a look at recently. It's got a built-in micro SD card reader. It's got built-in OCulink. We also have dual 5 gig LAN at the back. Full-size DisplayPort, HDMI, a USB 2 port, a USB super speed, 5 gigabit port, 19 volt input, USB 4. Yes, true actual Thunderbolt. You get the little slide for webcam privacy, and then on the side, which is kind of the front, you've got 2 USB ports and another USB 4 port, the reset button, and a combination headphone microphone jack. It has mounts on the bottom, and it breathes through the bottom, but the feet aren't very tall. So if you were going to try to use this in a desktop configuration, it doesn't breathe as good as it should, but it does exhaust hot air out the top, which is nice, sort of the natural chimney effect. So I definitely would recommend that you use this in the standard desktop configuration where you can take advantage of the webcam and the screen on the front. Yeah, there's a screen built in. Look at this stand. It's not exactly standard, but it is nice. In the box, you also get a short HDMI cable and your power brick. It is a standard 19 volt, 120 watt power brick. Now, if you're not in the loop for Intel's new branding, Core Ultra is what Intel is calling their stuff now. And this is a mobile CPU technically. It's got a weird core layout, or at least one that we've not seen before, one that I've not taken a look for in the video. And I'm really excited for this because of the core layout and for stuff that I can use for diagnostics. And also because it's Wi-Fi 7. So it's 6 performance cores, 8 efficiency cores, and 2 low power efficiency cores. This is Intel getting into the chiplet game. And on the I/O side, so when this thing is shutting down and is in super low power mode, normally for notebooks, it has 2 ultra low power efficiency cores that are basically off CPU. So it's able to turn off completely the performance cores and the efficiency cores. It's like even more ultra efficient efficiency cores, which is pretty awesome. If you're just watching a Netflix movie with hardware decode, theoretically, you could shut down basically everything. Okay, it turns out that for Netflix, you can't shut down basically everything. You still need the hardware for the hardware decode, but for checking your email and background tasks and standby, those efficiency cores can be really good in terms of long battery life. In a desktop use case, well, there's just no battery. It's not going to help you with long-running tasks there. But when Minisforum makes a little bit more progress when we start talking about Intel vPro and remote management, then the fact that those cores are always on, you could incorporate that into your management solution. There's a whole lot of creative things you could do. That's going to be the future, though. It doesn't do that today, but maybe someday it will. So for now, what you can use those efficiency cores for are just long-running background tasks. Atomman. Harnessing the power of the atom, putting the lightning in... No, I don't know. The BIOS on this is fairly locked down. It does give you some options around CPU configuration. It also supports EFI network booting, which is important if you're going to use this as part of an asset management thing or whatever. You set the network to, boot and be the primary boot, and then you can re-image the machine remotely. You can do a lot of creative things with it based on MAC address. CPU configuration, you can enable and disable virtualization and VTD and hyper-threading. By default, it's turbo performance. It has Intel SpeedStep enabled. The C states are enabled. Turbo mode is enabled. All the cores are enabled. You can disable the cores that are just on the SoC if you want. If you've got some piece of software that doesn't understand, that barely understands performance and efficiency cores, and you're throwing in another layer of kind of efficiency core, that could be a problem for you. You just disable those. For the onboard device settings, you can pick an external GPU, which works with the OCulink interface. You can also do RAID, so it has dual M.2, and if you wanted to do a RAID 0 or a RAID 1, it does have VMD set up, and you can do that with VROC. You can also enable and disable the individual LAN ports, the Wi-Fi, and the SSD ports, as well as the OCulink, and also set the PCIe speed, which is nice because they don't always include the PCIe speed dropdown, but they remembered to do that on this one. You can also enable and disable resized bar above 4G decoding and SR-IOV. There's some ACPI settings to make the machine turn on automatically if it loses AC power, which is nice if you're going to use this as like a home server type setup. You can also have it wake up at a specific time, and you can also have it respond to wake on LAN. It also has a built-in hardware monitor to give you an idea of how it performs. You can also set the fan performance profile in here to be balanced, high performance fan all the time, which probably will shorten the lifetime of the fan, or to try to have the system be as silent as possible. You also have the ability to enable and disable Deep Sleep S5, which is disabled by default, but LCM is enabled by default. So this is probably something that makes sense for the modern platform. Deep Sleep S5 is kind of sort of going away. DDR5 and standby current. It's a whole other conversation. This is a sensible, reasonable BIOS. It would be nice if we had some more enthusiast home lab type options, especially because we got the dual 5 gig interface, but hey, not bad. I'm also surprised that there are not more USB 4/Thunderbolt options in here, because it would be nice if you could change the security profile for older legacy like Thunderbolt 2 devices using Thunderbolt 2 to Thunderbolt 3. I would expect those devices to be a little problematic. But maybe not. That's a test for another day. A level 1 forum inquiry, if you will, if you pick up one of these for its Thunderbolt interface or its USB 4 interface. Definitely something to let us know your experiences. Now, for me, it worked fine with our Thunderbolt enclosure, that's Thunderbolt 3, but OCulink is, of course, twice as fast as that. Actually, it's more than twice as fast as Thunderbolt 3, depending on the scenario. But that's neither here nor there. Now, the built-in camera and microphone. There is a privacy shutter, but the privacy shutter doesn't physically deactivate the camera or the microphone. So I can slide it over, the camera still comes on, you just get a red nothing. But it's still able to record everything. The quality from the camera is definitely pretty good. It's hard to see the camera, but it is there. And it is a stereo mic setup. It's pretty polished for what it is, really. The default out-of-the-box application for the touch screen gives you stats about the system. How busy is the CPU? The CPU, the GPU utilization, RAM utilization, SSD, it's pretty bog standard. I was looking for information on how to customize this. Maybe you could turn this into a sort of a ghetto stream deck somehow. That'd be a really killer feature. I didn't really see anything about that. I'm sure if you're going to buy a fleet of these for your use in a commercial installation, that Minisforum would be glad to talk to you about customizing the software. To the system, it shows up as a USB device, a USB screen type display. And otherwise, it doesn't show up in, the system management or screens. You can't use it to move windows or email notifications on or anything like that. It's a specialized USB type LCD display. But it is neat. Changing the language is no big deal. You just need to bring up the toggle menu, hit this icon, then it's got an assortment of languages installed, so you can switch to English or switch it to whatever language you need. That works really well. And it does have an ability to customize some of the layout for the cards that you want to look at. Well, let's see how this thing stacks up performance-wise and what our default software loadout is. I like that you're able to access power management and performance profile. By default, it is in a balanced profile. And we can see our performance in Geekbench in the balanced profile is about 2536 and 13385 multi-core. Keep in mind, 16 cores. You really do have a lot of efficiency cores here. Those shine in multi-core performance. I was maybe expecting the single core to be a little higher, but we did sort of predict that Meteor Lake would have a little trouble besting the best performance of Raptor Lake. That's certainly holding up, but keep in mind this is in a much lower power envelope. When this thing is idling, it's barely using 9 watts of power, and that's with the built-in LCD screen. Our CPU benchmark scores over 8,000 with a single core speed of very nearly 800, which is pretty respectable overall, really. On the balance profile, we'll never see this thing exceed about 80 watts. It can use more if you've got a lot of high power draw USB peripherals installed, but 80 watts, give or take. And that's also with a single NIC. Running both NICs adds an extra 5 or 6 watts. I was surprised. Using the LCD to toggle performance mode, let's rerun CPU-Z. Our multi-core performance, basically still the same. About 8,300, give or take. It makes sense because Intel's really figured out the power profiles, and when the system is busy and it knows that it's going to be busy, you're going to get those turbo boosts. Doesn't really change our single core speeds either. This can make a difference for workloads that are kind of bursty, where the system is really busy and then it's kind of idle, and then it's really busy and it's kind of idle. But most of the time you don't have to set performance mode, and by not setting performance mode, the system will idle much cooler because it actually does enter into a low power state. It takes a few milliseconds to change from low power state to a faster, higher tier power state. So because it takes a couple of milliseconds to do that, depending on the job that you're doing, it may be wasting a lot of time moving between the lower and the higher power states. No big deal. So interestingly, Ada64 is new enough to detect our Meteor Lake CPU. I mean, like I say, these are notebook CPUs that are now making their appearance in mini PCs. 150 nanoseconds for our memory latency. This isn't the worst that we've seen from Minisforum, but I feel like we could do better with, dual DIMM DDR5. Well, the secret, the reason, command rate 2. Maybe that's normal for this platform. I mean, this is DDR5 5600, but that latency will give you a little bit of a penalty if you're going to try to use this for esports gaming or something like that. This is really just meant to be a workhorse machine. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just that that's a little slow. You can also tell that Ada64 correctly detects our 6 plus 8 plus 2, 6 performance cores, 8 efficiency cores, 2 ultra efficiency cores, poor configuration, and overall the rest of the performance numbers look pretty reasonable. Now, besides OCulink, there are some other pretty cool features on this platform. Fingerprint sensor. So the power button is a fingerprint reader, and it is compatible with Windows security. You can enroll it. I didn't have as much luck enrolling this fingerprint sensor on Linux, but it did look like it was supposed to be one of the supported fingerprint controllers, so that's something that I need to revisit. It also has Windows Hello. So the built-in face scanner also, I guess, has the depth map or the infrared map or whatever it is that makes it Windows Hello qualified, supposedly. Windows Hello works on this platform. So again, hospitality interface, like Minisforum knows their target audience. This is not necessarily meant to be a home mini PC. They sort of realize that. Commercial, hospitality, they get it, and they're adding the features that make sense for that. Still need to add Intel vPro or some other type of remote management system, but hey, it's cool to see those features built into a mini PC with a tiny little display. I mean, you could get creative and use the tiny little display as part of a controller system, like a sign controller, or, really creative use where you don't physically have a monitor attached, and a little monitor like this is all you need. Using this in your car, running it off of an inverter, and it self shuts down and you can monitor it, and it's relatively low power with its 9 watts of it's actually on doing things, but also idling and not asleep. And then like the standby power is on the order of like a watt. So that's pretty good, really. The network interface in this, in case you were wondering, dual 5 gig, and that is a Realtek interface. So those are Realtek network controllers. It's pretty awesome. It also has the 320 megahertz Wi-Fi 7. Wi-Fi 7 is a conversation in and of itself. There are Wi-Fi 7 devices on the market that only support 160 megahertz channel width. Wi-Fi 7 is 3 frequencies. So we have 2.4 and 5 gigahertz, and now 6 gigahertz. So that's the third band is Wi-Fi 7, but not every Wi-Fi 7 device is capable of also speaking at a wide channel width. The wide channel width and the relatively uncrowded 6 gigahertz frequency are what you need. You need both of those things to really truly unlock Wi-Fi 7 speed. Wi-Fi 7 access points are a little squirrely right now because Wi-Fi 7 with their 320 megahertz channel width makes sense in a low-density residential environment. It makes less sense in a high-density commercial environment. And so there are few, if any, commercial, truly Wi-Fi 7 solutions on the market that are designed for this kind of density. We're seeing the architecture of networks that are wireless change a little bit so that you have many, many, many small, low-power access points, building a large mesh so that devices can sort of hop between lots of relatively low-power access points that don't interfere with one another to get the device frequencies that we really need. There's also orthogonal frequency division multiplexing, which effectively makes the number of collisions and the available bandwidth that exists in a given spectrum way higher than other technologies, but I'm sure the RF people and the hams can fill in the gaps there because I'm really glossing over a lot of details. I like that it has all these bleeding edge features. This one is configured with 32 gigabytes of memory and a Kingston, like the standard issue Kingston, relatively decent performance SSD. Our Crystal disk mark numbers aren't too bad. Meteor Lake also has Intel's new Wi-Fi capabilities. Now with 32 gigabytes of memory, okay, with 96 gigabytes of memory, things get interesting. You can actually allocate 48 gigabytes of that for your iGPU. With 48 gigabytes of VRAM, does that mean that you can run a 70 billion parameter model quantized to 8-bit on an iGPU? And the answer is yes, but it's only going to run at about 3 tokens per second. Well, it depends on the model, and it depends on the setup, and it depends on a lot of other parameters. But are you able to actually use the AI acceleration stuff on the CPU and get a little bit of AI acceleration? And the answer is yes, but also I think the bigger news is that DDR5 and iGPU and allocating 48 gigabytes of DRAM on the iGPU actually does work for running very, very large language models. Now, you just permanently give up that memory as long as your iGPU is configured for 48 gigabytes, which is, a thing, not something that I really recommend, but it is something you can do on this platform. You're probably better off using the neural acceleration that's built into the new Meteor Lake CPUs. That's going to have to be a video for another day. Like, it's not earth-shattering, but that is the direction that the world and the industry is heading in. And so looking at software and benchmarks, like, what can it really do for you? Right now, the really big thing that it can do is not use a lot of power to blur the background in video conferencing. Does that really well. 70 billion parameter, I'm going to run something like that locally? We're still getting there. It turns out the iGPU with the 48 gigs of VRAM hack, a little better. But that's, we're getting there. It's my first Meteor Lake system. I'm excited for that alone. It's really not a bad showing for a Meteor Lake notebook chip out of the box. And the performance from the power figures are actually pretty darn impressive as well. But what about that OCulink port? Well, we've got something special set up for that. Why does he have a Cooler Master small form factor power supply? We're going to need it for the next thing. This. Look at this. Look at this magic. This is what you get in the box. The OCulink to PCI Express adapter, a short, noise-free OCulink cable, and a power supply adapter? That's what we need the power supply for. Digital Workshop. It's kind of sort of almost as janky as it looks. Oh, you've also got an M.2 adapter, so yeah, you can pop this little guy in an M.2 slot, even if you don't have an OCulink port. We've got an OCulink port, so it's no big deal, but M.2 to OCulink. Now, this does not have redrivers on it. That's a problem if you want to run Gen 4. Fortunately, Minisforum's got a little experience with OCulink, and this actually does work. But we need to shut down. OCulink is not hot plug. They actually do make an 8-lane version of this. This is just 4 PCI Express lanes. And this might actually be a more reasonable solution than Thunderbolt on Threadripper platforms, especially if you're packing in like 6 GPUs. I think that's a side note. That sounds weird to say that, but the reason for that has to do with bar space and allocating resources and how many bits you want to allocate, and the fact that basically no motherboard vendor is doing a lot of testing with 6 GPUs on a motherboard. I have to be the one to email them to say, hey, what's going on? 7 GPUs doesn't work on this motherboard with 7 PCIe slots. So this just relocates a PCIe slot for you. What is this? This is the cutest little SFF Ada generation RTX 4000. PNY sells these. I'm working on a project with PNY. Real excited for that. PNY, 20 gigabytes of VRAM, 75 watts in this package. There's no external power required. Now, if external power were required, this is an 1100 watt power supply. I can run anything I want. I can run an RTX 4090 off of this. Ooh, we might do that. Oh, waiting on Windows Update. It's always like that, ain't it? Thanks, Cooler Master, for sending this power supply. Let's fetch the 4090 while we wait. The light and the fan came on. It's magical. It shuts down correctly. And it turns on correctly. Magical. All right, let's try something a little bigger. It's booting. Do you see the spinning fan? It's alive! Alive! The trick is looking for the GeForce logo to light up. Microsoft Basic Display Adapter. Nah, it's an RTX 4090. Powered by Cooler Master. In a tiny desktop machine. Now, obviously, this is unwieldy, but there are OCulink docks out there. OCulink is the equivalent of 8 PCI Express 3.0 lanes, It's 4 PCI Express 4.0 lanes, assuming that you've got a nice short, high-quality cable and all the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed. You don't have to run a GPU in this either. You could run a network card, although you've got dual 5 gig, which is pretty reasonable. You could run an HBA interface so that you could connect an entire shelf of disks. A SAS disk shelf, like those LSI disk shelves that are so popular everywhere, would work really well here and pretty much anywhere else. Please don't be locked up. Please don't be locked up. Please don't be locked up. I wonder if Minisforum is tested with an Intel OmniPath adapter. That's 100 gigabit. It's a borderline PCIe fabric in its own right. Although at the end of the day, I do only have 6 performance cores. Might be nice to have some more performance cores. And 10 efficiency cores. But 10 efficiency cores, man, that's like Skylake cores. This thing would run circles around an E5 2650 V2. I'd probably give a 2697 V4 a run for its money. I mean, it's going to completely curb stomp it. It's single thread, but, you know, we've only got 6 performance cores and 10 efficiency cores. It's going to curb stomp it in terms of power efficiency. It'd probably be a little faster. GPU-Z is showing our PCI Express 4.0 by 4 link with our very power-thirsty GPU, 4090, hooked up to a Minisforum Atomman via OCulink. What? So obviously, if you've got a 4090 connected to 4 PCI Express 4.0 lanes, you got to install 3D Mark and benchmark it, right? I mean, that's a given. We've got to do this. We've got to see how it runs. I don't know that I recommend doing this with a 4090. Like, really, you'd probably be better off with 7900 GRE from AMD. That'd be a good choice. Firestrike Extreme. Here we go. This is crazy. Meteor Lake. Record-breaking Meteor Lake score. Film at 11. Well, there's their clickbait headline right there. Record-breaking score on Meteor Lake. Never mind, it's a 4090 connected via OCulink. These 3D Mark scores on a Atomman mini PC via OCulink PCI Express 4 to a 4090. But still, this is darned impressive. Now keep in mind, OCulink is not hot plug. Yes, it does have USB 4, Thunderbolt 4 basically. And so you could do the Thunderbolt thing with a Thunderbolt dock, and Thunderbolt is hot plug, blah, blah, blah. That is also an option on this platform. That works well. But OCulink, twice as fast. More than twice as fast. Technically, sort of, kind of. Mostly. When we're talking about just pure PCI Express function, there's no overhead taken out for PCI Express. That's what I mean. And there's also Firestrike Extreme. For Extreme and Firestrike 4K, you will lose less of your performance to the PCI Express overhead, and the fact that this has lots of VRAM really helps you out. At 1080p, that round trip time really increases because you don't have a lot of bandwidth between your CPU and your GPU. Plus, you've only got 6 performance cores, which would help you when you're chasing that 300 FPS dragon, but come on. Decidedly a little off-label, having to order your PCI Express adapters. A little janky. They do make more reasonable OCulink enclosures, but this is like $20 of hardware plus your SFX power supply. I mean, I got 1100 watts because the GPU alone can be 600 watts with an overclock. I'm not going to push it that far. I don't want to murder my 4090. A little bit of an off-label use case, but it does have the option, which is awesome. But bottom line, what are we working with here? This is a competent little machine. It's fast, it's responsive, it's got a micro SD card reader on the top, it's got a touch screen, it's got a lot of unique features here that you'd be hard-pressed to get on any other mini PC. It's got the Core Ultra. It's the X7 Atomman. In terms of raw performance, it stacks up against some pretty stiff competition. We've taken a look at mini PCs directly from Intel, now Asus, as well as B-Link and other Minisforum mini PCs, especially based around the 7 and 8000 series AMD CPUs. And the performance of those CPUs is genuinely very impressive. Shockingly impressive. Meteor Lake with Intel, coming from Raptor Lake and Alder Lake, I think those CPUs were on more sure footing. You can look at that in the Geekbench results from past machines with this machine sort of in tow. It's not bad. The performance is good. It's reasonable using it. The built-in graphics is reasonable. The experience using this as a desktop machine is reasonable. The touchscreen is neat. The built-in camera, 1080p, is okay. It's not bad. The fingerprint reader is nice. There's a lot of features here that are good for the business class use case. Hospitality, point of sale, business use. And so that, I think, will help them sell a lot. Heck, I was thinking about maybe turning it into a media ingest station, since it's got reasonably fast networking, and I can add a 5 gigabit or a 10 gigabit SD card reader and plug a bunch of SD cards into this and then read them all at 100 megabytes plus per second and copy that to the network. It's an option with this platform. Unwindowless Level 1 has been a first look at the Atomman X7. There's different configurations, obviously, if you want to get some different configurations and save a few bucks, or maybe even DIY would be an option, put your own memory and storage in it, but hey, this ain't bad. And the Linux performance, it's not bad either. Alright, I'm Windowless Level 1, I'm signing out, you can find me in the Level 1 forums.